I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. Local and homegrown food is a given when it comes to sustainable living. But for most home growers, gardening comes to a screeching halt when winter arrives. It's those colder temperatures and shorter days that seems to make it impossible to grow just about anything. And yet our desire for fresh from the garden produce is stronger than ever. Well, luckily, with some simple techniques, we can grow organically even in the dead of winter, and even in places like this. Eliot Coleman and his wife Barbara Damrosch are two of the top experts when it comes to pushing the limits of the harvest season. Their four-season farm is located in USDA Growing Zone 5 and is further north than Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, and even Toronto. And yet, here in Harborside, Maine, they're able to grow food commercially all year round, even in temperatures below zero. In their quest for a four-season harvest, they've tested and perfected many techniques, and along the way, penned numerous books for both small-scale farmers and home gardeners, covering organic, sustainable methods, and they've even hosted several TV gardening shows. One thing's for sure, Eliot and Barbara are passionate about sharing their knowledge for gardening in a simple, natural way.
Well, before I even knew anything about farming, I was an adventurer, and I used to spend my weekends rock climbing, whitewater kayaking, mountaineering. I was a ski racer also. And one day I read a book about small farming. Actually, it was about Back to the Land. It was called Living the Good Life by Helena Scott Nearing. But the thing that appealed to me, it made that life sound like an adventure. And so I just said, wow, that seems like something I'd like to do for a few years. And at that point, I was teaching at a college in New Hampshire. I had a teaching job to support me, but the nice thing about teaching jobs is you had the Christmas vacation, spring vacation, summer vacation to go adventuring. And I rented a piece of farmland while I taught for 2 more years, got my feet wet, decided this was fun. And in the course of that, I'd come to visit the Nearings and met them, and we'd become good friends, and they offered to sell me the back half of their farm. So we moved here, but again, on the adventure bit, it was an adventure because this was all wooded land. It was covered with spruce and fir trees. And I said, okay, that just makes it a better adventure. This makes it harder to get to the top. And getting to the top, trying to get there was the fun part of adventures. Well, Four-Season Farm is a vegetable farm, first off. But we also raise livestock. We raise chickens for eggs and for meat, and we raise pigs. And we're going to be adding in cattle and sheep soon. But we started out as a vegetable farm. And the fascinating thing was how successful we were raising every imaginable vegetable and not needing any of the inputs that conventional agriculture seemed to think were indispensable. All of our inputs were coming from local resources. And so we're near the ocean, we were getting seaweed. And we were composting that with spoiled hay from neighbors' fields. And we were getting clamshells, which we were putting into the fields. And that's a wonderful story in itself. I was spreading these clamshells, which I get from a neighbor who shucked clams, on a field when the local county agent stopped by one day. And he looked at what he was doing and he said, well, that's foolish. Those won't break down for 100 years. And I remember thinking, isn't that the perfect metaphor for the difference? Because I was thinking, wow, there'll still be some calcium in here when my great-grandchildren are farming this. So I was thinking in the long term, and modern agriculture was thinking, can we put something in and get something back tomorrow? But we were building long-term fertility, and that's what organic matter does. And we were able to turn this land, which started out with a pH of 4.3 and 3 inches of topsoil, into some of the most productive organic farmland I've seen anywhere. We now have about a 12-inch soil depth. It's filled with organic matter, it's filled with minerals, and every year we turn out absolutely beautiful vegetables. We don't use any pesticides because we don't need any pesticides, because when you grow crops correctly, the insects have no role. They can't maintain a population on a properly grown plant. And our standards are, everybody says, well, can you grow stuff as nice as the supermarket? Our standards are, if it looks as bad as the supermarket, we compost it. Our stuff is better than that.
Eliot, what was your goal as you started taking on the challenge of growing more things in the wintertime?
Well, the goal was to see if we couldn't feed our local population year-round, not just during the growing months, as they're called. And so we started out with the obvious best crop, which was spinach. Spinach is very hardy. Whenever you cut a leaf, it'll regrow as long as the plant's established. And that worked. And then we just kept adding crops in. We added in scallions, we added in Swiss chard, and all of the wonderful Asian greens, and carrots that we'd planted in August and wintered over and protected. And the best feeling I had one day when I went into the local food co-op that was carrying a lot of our produce, when we had 9 different crops in the cooler. And this was in February, and I said, wow, okay, we're getting somewhere with this.
Yeah.
This is pretty neat.
Plenty to keep you busy all throughout the winter then.
We stay about as busy as we want to be.
Good. So what are some of the misconceptions about even gardening in winter?
Well, probably the largest misconception is that you are gardening in the winter the same way you garden in the summer. And what you're actually doing is harvesting in the winter crops that you planted in the fall. Because once you get into the dead of winter, there isn't enough light to start new crops. But if you have crops that you planted in September and October, they keep growing like spinach. It keeps poking up new leaves every time you cut one. And so that's what makes it work. You're not gardening in the winter, you're harvesting crops that you planted the fall before.
So really what you're extending is the harvesting season, not the growing season.
You're extending the harvesting season, and I can guarantee you it's a shorter trip to the greenhouse than it is to the supermarket.
Oh, yeah. So we know there are certain crops that have no problem with the cooler temperatures, but you found ways to sort of push the temperature limits with systems that you've developed, Eliot.
Well, what we've found is that if these were out of doors in the winter, they would survive probably until Christmas. Spinach, it's pretty hardy. It'd be looking pretty beat up, but after that it gets so cold here that they would freeze, and the cold, dry winds would just suck the juices out of them. Now, if you put them in here, this simple single layer of plastic at least will cut the wind, and they're going to be doing a lot better. And that's what we found out years ago when we had them growing in a cold frame. But the time we really made the great leap forward was when, after getting tired of shoveling all the snow off the cold frame, we put a simple little hoop house over the cold frame to keep it free of snow. And then we discovered double coverage. And what I mean by that is, what we've learned with temperature records is that each layer moves the covered area 1 1/2 USDA zones to the south, about 500 miles here on the East Coast. So outside it's Maine, inside here you have a New Jersey climate. If you add another layer, a second layer, that second layer moves you an additional 1.5 zones to the south. And that 1.5 zones to the south takes you to Georgia.
Wow.
And so that's going to give you a far wider range of crops that you can grow. And the second layer now, instead of being a cold frame, is this spun bonded fabric, which gives you such a nice layer of protection. It's lightweight, it's self-venting, and it really does the job perfectly.
So you're able to get enough light through both layers so that the spinach can still photosynthesize.
Absolutely. And For many people, when they see this, they say, oh my gosh, let's put on layer 3, let's put on layer 4, and we can have cucumbers. But what happens is each layer cuts out an additional 10% of your light. So 2 layers, you've cut out just enough, that layer and this layer, just enough light to get the temperature you want. We leave it at that, because maybe we could grow cucumbers in here in the winter, and maybe people 50 years from now will look back on us and say, oh my gosh, how stupid they were. They could have done this, but for the moment, we think this is pretty darn good.
And it is, and on top of that, somebody at home can do the same system on a much smaller scale, right?
It would be so easy. People could start with the cold frames that we started with. You can take simple pieces of wire and make wickets and stretch this over it inside a small greenhouse. It is the easiest thing in the world to get this amount of climate change for free just by having 2 layers of covering.
If extending the growing season is something you'd like to try, then you certainly need a way to protect your plants during the winter. And the right systems can be used year-round. In summer, they're great as a barrier for insect protection and for keeping frost off your plants in fall and early spring. And you don't need an expensive greenhouse or hoop house for that. For a nominal investment, you can build a low tunnel just like the ones that professionals use. How's it going, Sean?
Okay.
Awesome. Now it all starts with this. This is galvanized electrical conduit known as EMT piping, and it's really inexpensive at only about $2 a piece, but once it's formed, it creates a hoop about 6 feet wide and 3 feet high before you put it into the ground. And you definitely want to use galvanized piping as opposed to plastic PVC, because this is really strong and sturdy to hold the snow loads, plus it doesn't break down under UV lighting, and once you form it, you'll have it for years. So how do you bend the pipe? Well, there are commercial pipe benders that you can buy, but I like this device that's made specifically for the purpose of bending pipes into the hoops we'll need to put into the ground. You can mount it to any solid surface, such as the corner of a workbench or picnic table, and it's secured with 2 screws and bolts. By securing it to a fixed position and pulling the pipe around the bender, you can maintain perfect control of the tubing as it's bent. To start, insert a 10-foot length of tubing into the holding strap so it's even with the end of the bender. On the first bending stroke, pull the tubing towards you around the bender until it touches the operator's end. Next, release pressure on the tubing and push only about half of the portion you just bent through the holding strap to make the next bending stroke. It's important to not push any more than half the bent length through at a time in order to maintain a smooth, consistent radius. This is the time where it's helpful to have an extra pair of hands to provide support for the bent end already shaped in order to keep the hoop on a single flat plane. Otherwise, it could corkscrew or twist. As you approach the end of the tubing, extra leverage is needed, which is provided by the enclosed bar. Just make sure there's adequate room on either side of the bender for the tubing to be inserted and slide through. It's great to have some help if you can get it, just to help stabilize the pipe during the bending process, but it's not required. This really is a simple job, and you can do it yourself. Hey, thanks a lot, Sean.
You're welcome,
See you later. Once the hoops are ready, insert them to a depth of about 10 inches and space them 5 to 6 feet apart. Then cover with a protective layer of plastic or spun-bound fabric. You can hold down the cover a number of different ways, including sandbags, stones, bricks, or whatever's handy. If you'd like step-by-step instructions for how to make your own low tunnels at home, as well as where you can get the supplies, like the pipe bender, we have that on our website under the show notes for this episode, and the address is the same as our name, growingagreenerworld.com. So we know that soil and light are really important, and you've got a handle on that, but there are other elements that you consider just as important for a successful winter garden.
Oh, it's the fertility of the soil that's going to make everything work. You know, we're sitting here looking at some beautiful dark brown soil. This is a potting mix that actually contains 40% compost. And the wonderful thing about compost, here it is, it's the world's best fertilizer. And you can make it for free in your backyard from waste products. And Mother Nature is on our side. She wants us to be well fed. And we use a lot of compost. We make all we can, because what that does for the soil is it allows moisture to be there in the proper amount. It allows air to be there in the proper amount. It holds nutrients in just the right way the plants need them. And it's giving you an even, gentle feed for your plants. It's the way plants have evolved to grow. So compost is really the key to getting the soil into the shape that it will then take care of your plants. Because if you want to prevent insects and diseases, you want to have your plants growing in about as benign a climate as they can grow. Well, we've created a benign climate with different levels of protection from plastic. But the other benign climate is your plants want to be having the right amount of air, moisture, and nutrients so they aren't stressed. And studies have shown that when plants are under stress, there's actually a change in their internal composition that makes them more suitable for insect nutrition. And so my role as a grower is I'm the stress reducer for the vegetables. I mean, it's like it's a wonderful job. I'm sure there are famous people out there who have their stress reduction experts. Well, my plants have one too, and it's me. And the better job I do growing stress-free plants, the better job I do having plants with no diseases, no insect problems, and optimum nutrition for the people who are going to eventually eat them.
Okay, so sound gardening practices are just as important no matter what time of the year it is, whether it's a home garden or a commercial farm setting. And this is the greenhouse connected to the main house for Eliot and the other famous gardener in the family, Barbara. And Barbara, it looks like you're off to a great start for supper tonight. What are we growing here?
I sure am. This is tatsoi. This is my favorite Asian green. It's super hardy. Grows in an unheated greenhouse. We've been having this in stir fries all winter. And in salads. It's just so tender and sweet.
This is delicious. Now you have 4 crops growing right now. Talk about that.
Well, this one is about over. I mean, you can see it's starting to go to seed. And we'll be pulling this out and planting something else. But meanwhile, look what's coming along. We have this beautiful cut and come again salad mix with different colors. Look at that.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to put some of that in the salad, and this will regrow. So this will have several successions. I'll cut, then it'll regrow again. This will keep going all spring long.
Now, another thing that you're doing is you're growing spinach, and it's clear that you've planted this at different times.
Yes, now that's another example of succession with a single crop. So we have some older spinach there, which we can be picking right now, and here's some young spinach coming along for the spring. Then over here, these are some carrots, and I think I might pull some of them for supper too. Those have been in the ground all winter long, and they're starting to regrow. So we're soon going to be pulling those out, and we're going to plant something in a different family from carrots. We're going to put lettuce in there. Not this lettuce, but some head lettuce, so we have some of both. Then that other bed here, which we have to clean up and start over with, that's going to have some of the brassica family. We're going to have arugula, we're going to have some baby turnips, we're going to have some radishes. They're all related, so they'll be fine there.
But I hear you mentioning specific families and how you're going to plant a different family when the carrots come out, and you're referring to crop rotation there.
That's right.
Talk about that a little bit.
You want to follow one family with another family so that diseases aren't transferred to the next crop. Sometimes the root system of one will benefit the following crop. Any overwintering pests you don't want to have follow the next crop, that kind of thing.
Now eventually all the lettuce is going to run its course. What are you going to put back in that bed?
Same thing I'm going to put in this bed, flowers. I'm going to plant both of them with zinnias, and I'm going to have them at least 3 weeks before anybody else.
Why am I not surprised? Another way Four Season Farm keeps busy year-round is with their chickens. In summer, they enjoy fresh air and open pastures and roost in the safety of any one of several mobile chickshaws at night. In winter, when the ground is frozen and they need protection from the elements, the chickens are put in a 50-foot greenhouse. With plenty of light and passive solar heating, this hoop coop offers plenty of room as well as warmth and safety. And even on the coldest days, these lucky chickens are getting access to grass, clover, and insects just a scratch away. Every Friday, the house is hooked up to a tractor and dragged 10 feet. Once the tractor fires up, the chickens know that a new patch of earth is about to open up. Barbara attributes this well-balanced diet to the amazing eggs that their customers can't seem to get enough of. It's another way to have winter food for Barbara and Eliot, and they love the closed-loop system on the farm, where what's grown there is nourishing the livestock, which in turn nourishes the plants. Well, in case you still had any doubts, we hope by now you've seen fresh, organic produce can be had during those winter months, no matter what the thermometer says outside. With some simple techniques, you too can harvest delicious food any time of the year. Now, if you'd like to learn how to extend the harvest, you can get that on our website, and the address is the same as our name, It's growingagreenerworld.com, and you'll find it under the show notes for this episode. I'm Joe Lample. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World.